start things off here. We're gonna start with what we saw last night on Monday Night Football. No, not that first game because I that game was over 5 minutes in. I'm
You sure
talking
you
about
don't want to talk about the Jaguars Bills game? You sure?
well, I mean we can talk about it in passing, but I want to start by talking about the Cincinnati Bengals, who I had predicted at the start of the year would be the number one seed in the AFC. They are now 0-3. And ironically, I still feel like they're the best team in the division. I don't know. Now you got the Washington Commanders, who I did pick to finish second in the NFC East, ahead of the Dallas Cowboys. And last night was one of the reasons why, because Jayden Daniels shined. He put on arguably the greatest single game, at least in completion percentage, the stats say, a rookie quarterback has had in NFL history. It's a big game changer for Washington and that Cincinnati defense. I don't know what they were doing.
Yeah. Um, I still get concerned though with Jayden Daniels because remember the last time Washington drafted a mobile quarterback, number 2 overall, and he played on that field? Where is he now? I don't even know because he's not with ESPN anymore.
Yeah, that guy, of course, Robert Griffin III, that gruesome knee injury. He was injured throughout his rookie year. And obviously, the concern with Jaden Daniels is his stature, is his frame. But last night, you just saw that ability. And I think in this offense, with Cliff Kingsbury, who we all know is not a great head coach, but I think he's a pretty good offensive coordinator, calling the plays, Terry McLaurin going one on one with whatever Bengals corner they put on him last night. It was a showcase. It was the first game since 1940. There was no turnovers, there's no punts.
Yeah. Um, there we go. Your screen was frozen for a minute there, so I didn't fully hear what you said. But anyway, my one concern with the Commanders is, yeah, they have Terry McLaurin, but who else do they have at the wide receiver position? Like, I'm just a little worried that as the season goes on, unless somebody else emerges at that wide receiver position, Jayden Daniels is just going to become heavily Terry McLaurin dependent.
Well, and they watched Austin Eckler last night to a concussion. Obviously, not great. Um,
And they also trade Jahan Dodson to the Philadelphia Eagles.
they did, but I'll be honest, John Dotson's been barely on the field in the first 4 games of the season. So, whether that's him, whether it's the Commanders, I don't know. But from what I've seen now, again, they have not punted. One of the games was against the Giants, who we will talk about in a little bit. But they have not punted in their last 2 games.
Yeah, so their offense is clearly working, but I still have that concern
Yeah,
regardless.
their secondary is obviously the weak part of their team. Like if there's one team in the NFL that has a glaring need on defense, kind of like the Lions last year, we all kind of said like they need a corner. Same thing with the Commanders, they need a corner. They probably need to draft 2 in the draft.
I would say they also need another wide receiver to go alongside Terry McLaurin because again, I just don't think like you can have one wide receiver and that's it.
Well, I think that in this day and age, increasingly, when teams are running the football, I think we're seeing early in the season you can win with that. I don't think you can win consistently trying to outshoot the opponents. This isn't college football.
Right. No, I agree with you, but I just think like if you have more than one like weapon to throw to, that's going to benefit you in the long run. Like we saw that. I know this is I'm not trying to compare the Commanders to the Kansas City Chiefs, but you look at like when Mahomes has had success. He had Travis Kelsey, he had Tyreek Hill, he had um he's had Juju, he's had MVS, so he's always had like 2 or 3, not always great, but he's always had 2 or 3 good to very good. Sometimes
Well, I would say right now, Austin Eckler, when healthy, is his second best weapon. And I think Zach Ertz has been very good at the tight end position this year for them. And they have Robinson coming out of the backfield.
right. Um I just look more at the receiver group specifically because I personally I view the wide receiver as like very highly on the list of importance on a football team. That's just me
Um,
personally.
I think the league has changed. I think 5 years ago you could be right, but I mean, you look at those New England teams. New England never had great receivers. You look at Kansas City teams that have won outside of the year they did have Tyreek. 2 years ago they had Kelsey. They didn't have much else.
Right,
Even San Francisco, they have good receivers. I wouldn't say they were great receivers, specifically in the Garoppolo days.
right. I do hear your argument, but like for example, in Buffalo, when did Josh Allen really become the Josh Allen that we know him to be?
Right now he's becoming the Josh Allen without any receivers, basically.
I I I I hear you, but by the same token, I don't think he would have
It can
initially.
it can I agree with you. It can help a young quarterback in their career, but I think what we're seeing is as the quarterback gets older, as he gets paid more, if you think he's the guy, you don't need that go-to number one receiver.
Right. I do understand that. I'm saying,
So,
but like that's why I think Cincinnati took off. In the
okay,
past
well,
few
let
years.
me switch gears quickly to Cincinnati because I alluded to it in my opening frame. Josh, I still think they're better than Pittsburgh. I don't care that Pittsburgh's 3-0, Cincinnati's 0-3. I think Cincinnati's the better football team. I don't care that Baltimore's 1-2. I think Baltimore's better than Pittsburgh. I mean, I'm sorry, this Steelers start is not sustainable. They beat Kirk Cousins on one leg. They beat Bo Nix, which Mike Tomlin's going to do a very good job against a rookie quarterback most days. And they beat basically a one-legged Justin Herbert. So I'm sorry. We talked about the Steelers' schedule. We talked about how it comes down to the final 8 weeks. Cincinnati's defense may not be as good as I thought, so their win total may be going down to 8 or 9 wins. But again, if Burrow's healthy and Chase is out there, and now you got Higgins back, I think this team could still turn it around.
I mean, yeah, yeah, Cincinnati could. They have the potential to turn it around, but I, what have they shown you that they can turn it around? That's my question. Um,
Well, they put up 33 points last night, and my argument is they were a strip fumble away from beating New England, and they were arguably a missed PAT away from beating Kansas City. And by the way, last night they missed another field goal. McPherson is now becoming unreliable. And on the 2 point conversion, T. Higgins should have got a PI call that wasn't called.
yeah, and that's fair. I'll give you that. There's definitely been some like ref interference in some of these in these first three games for the Bengals.
What I'm telling you is what I've seen from Cincinnati is yes, they're 0-3. They could very easily be 3-0 and probably at the least should be 2-1.
Okay, I'm looking. So the Bengals have the Panthers this week.
Did I
Then
not tell you, Carolina, by the way? I told you they were going to win the game.
yeah, and then they host Baltimore. Then they're at the Giants, and then they're at Cleveland, host Philadelphia, host Las Vegas, at Baltimore.
So to me, like, that's like, you got to go. How many games is that? 6 games? You got to go 4-2 in that stretch.
Yeah, I think they can beat Carolina. They can beat the Giants. Given the way we're playing right now, they can come into Cleveland and beat the Browns.
Historically, though, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know, but given
We'll,
the way,
we'll, we'll talk about it. I think that they will beat Philly at home. I'll say that up front. I think if the game's in Philly, I'd give the edge to Philly. I think it's because it's in Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati can win that game at home. Vegas is the tricky one. Where is that game at?
in Cincinnati,
Okay, so that's a benefit for Cincinnati. I'll give Cincinnati a win there. Is the Giants one in New York?
technically New Jersey, but
New
yes.
Jersey. Okay, so as we talk about here, which I think, by the way, is we're going to talk about it here. The one strength the Giants do have is their defensive line, and because of that, is that a game they could steal if Malik Neighbors goes off? Yeah, but Cincinnati should win that game.
Yeah. Um, and at following the Raven or the Raiders game, you got at Baltimore on Thursday Night Football.
That's going to be a tough one. Short week playing Lamar in their own division.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I thoroughly enjoyed 3 quarters of this game. I did not enjoy the fourth quarter, but let's be honest, it was all mostly empty calorie stats. The Cowboys got a lucky onside kick, which nobody recovers anymore. Mostly they got beat down in this game 28-6, and Baltimore does what Baltimore does, and they let their foot off the gas pedal. Josh, this is what I said. This is why I told you going into the year I had the Commanders over Dallas in the NFC East, because I said the Dallas Cowboys are not a tough physical team. They're all finesse. If you can run on them, if you can punch them in the mouth, they're going to fold. And they didn't do anything to upgrade in the run game. And Micah Parsons looks absolutely lost trying to defend the read option. Lamar Jackson was juking him out of his boots all day long. And until the Cowboys find a way to fix this run defense, which is all about mental toughness and will, I think, more than actual skill. That, we know Dallas has players in the defensive line. I think it's more about toughness than the scheme that they have. They're in trouble.
Really, Dallas should be 0-3 if the Browns had just decided to follow the blueprint of the Ravens and Saints by just running the football right down Dallas's throat. But don't get me started with the Browns, because
That's our next topic, folks. Stay tuned.
Yeah. Just a little preview. I am done with Deshaun Watson, but I'll get to that. But, why'd you bring Mike Zimmer over if your defense is just going to play like this? You knew Baltimore was going to come in and run the football right down your throats with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. And for some reason, Dallas just allowed them to continuously do it. Are you not going to make any adjustments? And to be fair, Lamar hit some big plays in the passing game too. But, it was mostly, okay, we're just going to line up with a fullback and Derrick Henry, run the football down your throat, and you can't stop it.
I want to take this angle that I don't think a lot of people are taking about this game. Obviously, the whole talk about is how, Dallas gave up like 250 yards rushing. But no one's talking about how through 3 quarters, this Cowboys offense put up 2 field goals. And one of them was a 65-yarder by Aubrey. That's right. It. And this team does not have a run game. And as I told you before the season, I didn't care about Brandon Cooks. Ferguson's a nice tight end. He's coming off that meniscus sprain. He missed week 2. But I told you, this team is CeeDee Lamb or bust. If you take CeeDee Lamb out of the game, if you frustrate him, this team has no other weapons, in my opinion, that scare you offensively.
I fully agree with you. And I'm just like, okay, Jerry, why'd you take so long to pay Dak Prescott? Why'd you take so long to pay CeeDee Lamb? You knew some of the issues with your offense, and you didn't address them in the draft, free agency, whatever. You didn't address them, and now you're dealing with the results. And now they have to turn around on a short week, go to New Jersey, and play a very pesky New York Giants team.
That's a team who historically Dallas has dominated. I mean, last year's 2 games weren't even close. This should be a get-right game for Dallas, but the difference this year may be the Cowboys are starting 2 rookies at offensive line, left tackle, and center, and they don't look like the offensive line that Dallas has had the past few years. And the Giants' strength is what? Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau up front, that defensive line. You can make an argument that's the biggest strength of the Giants football team.
I mean, Daniel Jones is coming off of a game where he outdueled $230 million fully guaranteed man. So,
by the way, he's done that statistically over the past 2 years. You actually look, Daniel Jones a better quarterback, but
yeah.
Do we just dive into it?
I mean, Our offensive line was a freaking turnstile. You get a sack, and you get a sack. I am done with Deshaun Watson. Done. Done. I don't care that he's getting 5 years, fully get 230 million, fully guaranteed. I want his butt on the bench. I want Jameis Winston starting. But then again, he might get sacked 8 times because our offensive line is in shambles. Without Nick Chubb, our running game is just non-existent. I don't know what's happened to our passing game. Our defense, Miles Garrett is injured.
And I don't know how he got the best graded PFF grade in week 3 because I didn't even see him on the field. He didn't make one impact play to me the whole game. That's just me. Listen, Deshaun Watson was not good. He missed open receivers. He looks bad in the pocket. And me and you talked about this, a week or two ago. He should be benched. Absolutely, I agree. The issue is, though, is what you brought up, which is I'm going to defend Watson a little bit in that I don't know if Patrick Mahomes could have done magic out of that offensive line on Sunday. That was every time you looked up, and I'm just
yeah,
going to say it right now. DeJuan Jones is not a right tackle. He needs to move inside the guard. He's too slow to play tackle. He could be a very good guard. I'm not saying he's a bust. I'm saying he's too slow to play tackle in the NFL. His feet are too slow. You clearly saw that on Sunday. Burns was just working around him almost every snap. Now Dredrick Wills is down. Now you got Joe Batonio having to move out to left tackle. Wyatt Teller, your best offensive lineman, is about to go on IR or could go on IR. With that being said, Kevin Stefanski, and yeah, if you want to put blame on Ken Dorsey, go ahead. But Kevin Stefanski is the play caller, so I'm going to put more blame on Stefanski.
and that's fair.
Your
I'll give you that.
Your offensive line is decimated. You have a quarterback who is clearly uncomfortable in the pocket because he doesn't trust his feet and he doesn't trust his offensive line. Why do you not try to run the football? They did not try till about the fourth quarter, and actually Jerome Ford got something going, and they got back in the game. But I want to make 2 points here. Number one is what bothered me about this Browns team. The score is 7-0, and they get a touchdown called back on a flag. I think it was holding on the offensive line. And the entire Browns team is dancing in the end zone.
No, you're talking about the pick six that was called back because I think it was a roughing the passer penalty or whatever.
You're right.
When,
the rough
yeah,
on Daniel Jones.
Because all the roughing the passer penalty was because the guy ran into like Daniel Jones's helmet and barely touched him, but that's automatically gonna be a flag. I'm sorry.
By rule, it is automatically a flag.
Right. It was the right call. Absolutely. I'm not denying that.
You get a pick six, and the Browns are dancing in the end zone. It's a soft look for the football team. So that bothered me, number one. Number two, what bothered me is, again, you go into the first half, you are getting your ass kicked. There are no adjustments whatsoever on either side of the ball. I think Jim Schwartz deserves blame for the defensive game plan because it did not make sense at all. They were wanting Malik Neighbors, destroy Martin Emerson all game. They didn't want to, shadow Denzel Ward on him. Malik Neighbors was just taking the game over. They didn't put any pressure on Daniel Jones. Nobody got home on that Browns defensive line, and the offense, the scheme, it just doesn't work. Kevin Stefanski is an under center, outside zone bootleg quarterback. We've seen teams all over the league. Minnesota, Green Bay, Atlanta, San Francisco. They all run the same scheme. Deshaun Watson is a shotgun, 11 personnel, 3 wide receiver offense like he ran in Houston. The scheme doesn't work. Can we just admit it now? The scheme does not work.
I fully agree with you. The scheme does not work. But do you know who has a ton of egg on their face? So much so that I don't think you can even see their faces. The Haslams, the owners of this team. You're the ones that pushed to trade for Deshaun Watson. You're the ones that back in, I think it was 2014 or whatever, that pushed to draft Johnny Manziel. God, I even hate saying that name. And like, think about it. Think about how many different head coaches, quarterbacks, offensive play callers, defensive coordinators, general managers. It's been a revolving door for this organization at all of those positions since the Haslams took over. Now, I get it, like, it's been that way even before the Haslams took over, but you look at teams like Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Kansas City, uh, San Francisco, the Rams, for example, New England, they're all stable Green Bay, they're all stable franchises. Like Baltimore and Pittsburgh. Think about how long John Hardball and Mike Tomlin have been at those two organizations. And think about it. Think about how much success Pittsburgh had with Big Ben, and the fact that on
Well,
top of that,
what success have they had in the last 8 years?
I'm talking about just in general. Like the Steelers with Mike Tomlin, they have not had a losing season. Baltimore has, on the other hand, they've won the division multiple times. They've been to the top seed in the playoffs. They've been to the AFC Championship game like 3 times, something like that. Won a Super Bowl. You know the story in New England. I don't have to go through that. Green Bay, okay, maybe not as much, but you get my point. They've won multiple divisions. They've been to the playoffs multiple times. The Rams, they've stayed with Sean McVay. It won them a Super Bowl. They've been to the playoffs multiple times. You get my overall point. The Browns do not have that kind of stability because they are constantly firing head coaches, getting new starting quarterbacks, whether it's through the draft, free agency, whatever. Honestly, like, given the way the season is going, the Browns should just tank at this point and go for Quinn Ewers or Cam Ward, somebody.
This
Because,
is the reason why I told you the Browns are not a playoff team.
no,
This is the reason why I told you the Browns were going to finish last in the AFC North this year. I told you the offensive line was an issue. I told you the loss of Callahan as the offensive line coach was an issue. I told you I did not buy the Stefanski Watson relationship.
I
have been
never have.
I have been right on the Browns from day one this year, outside of the fact that I thought they would lose to now hapless Jacksonville. And when you actually take a look at it, they let the Jaguars back in the game, which we both said was a concerning sign. Let me add this. Everybody thinks the Browns are going to bounce back this week and probably should win. I don't know the line. I haven't checked it yet on this Vegas game. The worst thing that happened to the Browns this week was not losing to the Giants. It was the fact the Las Vegas Raiders got embarrassed by the Carolina Panthers. Because you want to know what happens when teams get embarrassed? They give you their best shot. 9 out of 10 the next week. So whether it's Aiden O'Connell or whether it's Gardner Minshew, Antonio Pierce said that he's going to make business decisions this week. I guarantee you the Las Vegas Raiders are going to be playing with their hair on fire this week against the Browns. And the Browns better be ready and they better come out prepared. Because if they don't win this game, this season's spiraling out of control.
It might reach the point where the fans are starting to put paper bags over their heads. I mean,
I don't think it's going to get that bad. But I mean, the Commanders, I told you, are not going to be an easy game in week 5. Then I will be joining the sports room as we preview week 6, Eagles, Browns in Philly. You know that's not an easy game. You already mentioned. Then they have Cincinnati and Baltimore after that.
And then the Chargers. So, I'm just like, Nick Chubb is supposed to come back in week 5 against Washington. No, I would not have him come back.
Tony Grossi the other day said if he's heard it could be week 11. I've heard 2 different timelines on this.
So
I've heard the timeline you said, and then Grossi came out the other day and said, no, it could be week 11.
Okay. So if it is the timeline that I'm saying, I would not have him make his return in Washington against the Commanders on that field.
Oh, I
Absolutely
would. Oh,
no
I would.
way. No, no,
If
no.
you're 1-3, he's gonna play. Now,
I
if
would
you're
not
two
put.
and two, maybe not. But if you're 1-3 and your season's on the line, you're playing Chubb. If he's ready to go.
You're putting him on that field.
I don't care if my season's 1-3 and I'm coaching for my job. Because at that point, that's what Stefanski's doing. You're coaching. Think about if Washington looks bad, he may have no choice but to go to Winston to save his own arse.
Yeah. But I want to flip it to the Giants now before my head freaking explodes. Sometimes I wonder why I'm a fan of this team, but for some reason I'm going to continue to be. But
So wait a minute. A great count here. So the Browns are 6.5-point dogs. That's interesting. Um,
okay, I did not see that. Last I saw on ESPN, the Raiders were a 1 point favorite. That
six 6.5 feels huge.
Yeah, yeah. According to ESPN, it says the spread is Vegas -1. So I'm not sure where he's getting the
Okay,
rate.
so that might be a pick 'em at that point. Which to me, that's right. That 1.5's about right.
Yeah, I don't know where he got the 6.5, but as of right now, it says the Raiders are a 1 point favorite, and even though the Browns technically won against Jacksonville, I'm 0-3 because I picked the Browns to beat the Cowboys in week 1. I picked the Jaguars to win in week 2, and I picked the Browns to win in week 3. So while the Browns record is 1-2, I'm 0-3 in terms of my picks. But I want to flip to the Giants again before my head freaking explodes. Because like we were saying earlier, Daniel Jones thoroughly outplayed Deshaun Watson, and it's not even close. Malik Neighbors just exploded onto the scene. And like I was saying, or like you were saying, Kayvon Thibodeau had a fantastic game. Brian Burns had a fantastic game. Lawrence, I forget his first name.
Dexter.
Dexter Lawrence. He had a fantastic game. So and I think the Giants defense had like at least 2 interceptions. So they played a great game. They deserved to win. There was no ref controversial call, unless you want to say the roughing the passer call or on the pick 6 was controversial, but it was the right call. But maybe the Giants are turning it around. I'm not sure.
Well, we'll see Thursday night. I want to talk about my game because this game took 15 years off my life. Oh my God. For the love of God, do we know what a field goal kicker is? 4 straight possessions in the red zone. Jalen Hurts interception. Jalen Hurts fumble. Turnover on downs. Turnover on downs. We dominated the New Orleans Saints. We turned this team back into a pumpkin. You take away Raheem Shaheed, you bottle up Alvin Kamara, you stop the Saints offense. Jalen Carter had an all pro like game. A game that you always would tell me Aaron Donald would have. That's the game Jalen Carter had on Sunday. Absolutely destroying the Saints offensive line. Zach Bond making tackle after tackle. Quinyon Mitchell having another couple pass breakups in the secondary. We moved the ball. Saquon Barkley, 140 yards, big touchdown. And that was even after he didn't touch the ball in the first quarter. And Dallas Goedert coming through on a play, 3rd and 16, where it was man coverage by the Saints. Actually, Dodson, the guy that we were talking about earlier for Washington, creates a nice pick for Goddard, allows him to get wide open down the sideline for the game-winning touchdown. We should have won this game by a lot more. I swear it was like I was watching Brandon Staley coach. I didn't understand not taking the field goal when it was 3-0 going into halftime and tying the game. I didn't understand why he didn't take the field goal midway through the third quarter when it was a 3-0 game. This game shouldn't even have been close. So I feel better about my defense. My offense, I think, will get there. And Jalen Hurts is alerted to the end zone. That's a very funny comment. I appreciate it. Again, I think there were some good signs. I think there were some bad signs. I am concerned though about Devontae Smith being out multiple weeks after a dirty hit that no one is talking about from the Saints linebacker, and I don't have his name, but it was a play where Devontae Smith's forward progress was stopped. Saints linebacker comes up, knocks him in the back of the head, and knocks Devontae Smith out with a concussion. So glad we got the win, but very stressful.
Before I dive more into this game, let's just talk about the fact that the Dallas Cowboys were the only NFC East team that did not win this week.
How about the
Think
Carolina
about that.
Panthers? Panthers were the only NFC South team that won.
That's true. So I just find that kind of ironic, but I don't know what to make of the Saints right after 3 weeks. Because, heading into this game against Philly, everybody was giving New Orleans their flowers and being like, oh, this team's legit. This team is scary and all that. At least that's what I had heard, from the various talking heads on ESPN, Fox Sports 1, whatever. I'm curious what the conversation surrounding the Saints is going to be like now after a game like
TBD until we see how they play against Atlanta.
The Saints are a very questionable team right now. I don't know if they're truly great. I don't know if they're somewhere in the middle. I don't know.
I think Philly gave you the blueprint, which is again stop Alvin Kamara, limit the big plays. They don't have a lot else offensively. Um, this whole game came down to analytics and math. And Greg Olson, who again I thought does a great job for Fox, he was on the call with Joe Davis, and he defended Nick Sirianni on almost every decision, saying that it's his aggressive nature. You got to go for it. You got to stick to what you believe in. And this is the problem that I have with analytics, and this is why it's getting every coach in the world fired, because analytics does not take into account the feel of the game. Analytics does not take into account that it's a 3-0 game with 5:50 left in the third quarter. You just roll all the way down the field and you need points. Instead, it says, well, it's 4th and 2. If they do this, it's more probable you get the first down. And if you don't go for it, you're going to get the ball back. It's all based off math. It's not based off feel. And when you coach based off math, it's going to cost you games. We are lucky to win that game. We stole that game. And again, my defense played the best defense an Eagles team has played since the 2022, though it was in 2023 because it was a playoff game, the NFC Championship game against San Francisco.
Where San Francisco basically was playing with one or two hands tied behind their back. But
well, in my opinion, and I told you this, in my opinion, we were already beating down the Niners before that happened. Speaking of a player that was in that game, I want to know if Howie Roseman can call the New York Jets and ask them for a refund. Can we get Hassan Reddick back? We'll give them back Bryce Huff. Because right now, Bryce Huff has pretty much been Hassan Reddick. He's disappeared. He hasn't been on the field. He hasn't registered one hit, one sack, 1-0 in 3 games.
I don't think the Jets are going to make that trade, but you can ask. But
well, are you sure? Bryce Huff was good for them last year. He had 10 sacks on 3rd down.
That's true. But the Jets are a confusing team. They won against the Patriots. Whoop-de-doo.
I will say this. I am afraid of us going down to Tampa because I just talked about Vegas got embarrassed. Tampa got embarrassed, and they're going to give us everything they can handle, and we may be going in there without Devontae Smith, Britton Covey, our punt returner slash receiver, is now an IR. A.J. Brown is likely not going to play. Wayne Johnson has a concussion. He probably will not play. Mekhi Becton is dealing with a hand injury. He's very questionable. We could have half our offensive line and half our wide receivers against a very angry and pissed off Tampa team. That's not good.
Spoiler alert, I have Eagles Buccaneers in my top 5 for this week because I think that's a huge game in what the NFC playoff picture could look like later in the season.